Well, I have a moment to play for you from an interview with Republican Congresswoman Maria Salazar that is as perfect as it is painful to watch, and it has to do with this trend we've seen among Republicans where they will fight against aggressively and vote against legislation that is either only supported by Democrats or is a Biden initiative that has some Republican support, but is still mostly a Democratic piece of legislation. But then, after trying to prevent a bill from getting through, these same Republicans will go out and brag about the ways in which the legislation is improving their constituents' lives or the money that's being invested in projects in their district because of a bill that they often called socialism or something and spoke out against Biden for, but they're trying to take credit for it anyways. It's rather enraging. We see this game played time and time again. Tommy Tuberville was one really prominent example where he goes out and tries to take credit for broadband investments that he voted against, and he got called out brutally for it. Well, now I have Maria Salazar as another example. And finally, a news anchor called her out ruthlessly and repeatedly, and his confrontation was so spot on that she just sort of gave up and said, I don't know, I don't even remember if I voted for it or not. Well, we remember how you voted, and it was wrong. And last thing I'll say before playing this clip is she has been particularly blatant about this. You'll hear the anchor bring up the fact that Maria Salazar has gone out and presented checks to people referring to money that she voted against, and she hasn't signed it. She's presented a check. She voted against it, likely because she wouldn't dare to support the initiatives Biden has been pushing for, the actual improvements to Americans' lives that he and Democrats have been implementing that Republicans like Maria Salazar have been fighting back against. With that being said, here it is.
Last month, you were at FIU and you presented a check for $650,000 to help small businesses at FIU. But you voted against the bill that gave the money that you then signed a check for and handed and had a photo op, the Consolidated Appropriations Act of 2023, right? You voted against that bill.
Right now, you have to give me more details, but I do know that every time I have an opportunity to bring money to my constituents, I do so. I just did $400,000. But look,
but you voted against the Chips and Science Act, right?
Listen, right now I need to ask my staff. But what do we look at the $40 million that I have brought to this community? Aren't you proud of me? Aren't you proud of the $40 million that I brought? But how much? Aren't you proud that I wrote the Dignity Act? Haven't I? Let's talk about the Americas Act.
Wait a second. Let me 1 second.
Tell me.
The money that you talk about, the $40 million that you bring back to the district, sometimes that money comes from bills that you voted against. You voted against the CHIPS Act, and yet you praise the fact that the South Florida Climate Resilience Tech Hub is going to be started in Miami, right? You voted against the infrastructure bill, and you talk about all the money that comes back to the airport. So at the same time that you're taking credit for the money that you bring back to the district, in Washington, you're voting against these projects on party line votes.
Listen, that was, I think, last cycle. I cannot really remember right now, but let's look at the Americas Act, which is what I'm going to, which is what I would like.
You don't want to explain why you voted against things.
I mean, right now, and I'm not trying to be a politician, there's so many bills that I've introduced that I know that many of them
these are bills that you voted against.
That I understand. But it's okay. Sometimes I vote and sometimes I don't. But let's look at the positive. Let's look at the $40 million that I brought.
Now, I'm sure this has happened with a Democrat at some point, for sure. But lately, it's constantly happening with Republicans, and it's because, let's just be honest, they have absolutely nothing affirmatively to run on. They have their against statements, sure. They have their against Biden stuff and against woke and against drag queens or whatever. But what are they for? What have they actually done? And it's gotten so bad that Republican Congress people are giving speeches on the House floor like Chip Roy saying he has nothing to run on and no achievements to speak of. Correct. So if they have no legislative accomplishments that they can point to as proof that they should continue being in power, they have to go attach themselves to the achievements of Democrats. I guess they don't have to, but they feel like they have to. Who, by the way, Democrats have a really long list in the last few years. I mean, we've talked about this so much, but again, let's sort of portray the contrast here and think about the list Of the first 2 years of Biden's presidency, when there was a Democratic majority in the House and Senate, we got the largest investment in infrastructure since the Eisenhower Highway Program, the Inflation Reduction Act, which in that we see the largest investment in green energy in American history, making sure we're the leader during that transition so that more jobs can be made in American industries, thriving in that sector in America, and for the sake of our planet, plus Medicare is now able to negotiate drug prices for seniors, lowering those costs and specifically capping the cost of insulin at $35 out of pocket per month. You have things like the PACT Act, an expansion of veterans healthcare coverage, the CHIPS and Science Act, investing in American manufacturing, a bunch of student debt relief, an incredible vaccine rollout to help to get things back to normal, the American Rescue Plan also serving to do that, and not to mention Biden's NLRB doing incredible stuff for labor, and the list just goes on and on. So that's the first 2 years of Biden's presidency. Again, Democrats have a majority in the House and Senate. Now hold that in your mind and contrast it with Republicans being in the majority for about the last year. We've seen some ridiculous investigations into Biden where Marjorie is showing nude photos of Hunter Biden for no discernible reason. And what else? Really think about it. What else? They haven't actually been working on behalf of their constituents to try to make their lives better. It's been about political attacks and culture wars and nonsense. So yeah, with all that in mind, it tracks that Maria Salazar would go dishonestly celebrate money going into her district that if she had had her way, wouldn't be going into her district at all. And Pete Buttigieg a while back nicely explained how these sorts of flip-flops on the part of Republicans is actually proof of the quality of these Democratic policies.
Many others stood in the way, denounced it as wasteful spending, denounced it as socialism. And of course, what's remarkable is it turns out they don't think it's socialism when it's coming to their districts. They think it's so great that they want to be at the press conference. They send press releases touting their advocacy for it. Sometimes they even describe themselves as having secured it, which is obviously, it's hard not to chuckle at that, sitting in the Department of Transportation that's approving some of these grants, or knowing that other departments in the Biden-Harris administration are making the decision to send this funding to these constituencies. But I think what we're demonstrating is, look, we're going to send this funding where it's needed. And this is places that are red, blue, and purple. We're not going to punish any American for the short-sightedness of their elected officials. These are good projects. And, look, the sign of a bad policy is the people who pushed it abandon it later on. The sign of a good policy is even the people who fought it and stood in the way at the time come to support it. I just wish they would be a little more straightforward and maybe even go so far as to acknowledge that they were wrong when they said that this infrastructure bill was a bad idea. And they were wrong to call it socialism, as evidenced by the fact, or at least wrong to denounce it as socialism and wasteful spending. If it is socialism, then it seems to be socialism that these Republicans love when it's coming their way.
And that's exactly it. I wish so badly that Republican voters would start seeing these sorts of hypocritical actions and change course. Make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel. It's so easy. Boom, that's all you got to do. And it helps the show. Then if you want to go a step further, you can become a member at lukebeasleyshow.com/membership.